Hi everybody! Today I'm going to teach you how to use Unreal Engine to let your Twitch chat control your character so you can do fun stuff like this.
Hello Fruitsy.
Hi! So let's get started. This isn't going to be for complete beginners. I'm going to assume you're already a VTuber and using Unreal Engine so we can focus on the interactive Twitch stuff. We're going to be using a plugin called Twitworks. This is going to let your chat type in commands to control stuff in your engine, like this. And for folks that are doing that already, I'm also going to show you how to make things more flexible, so your chat doesn't even need to use commands. So instead of !hello, your chat can type something like,
Hi. Hey. Hey a Fruitsy. Hi a Fruitsy. How are you Fruitsy? Fruitsy, how are you?
You get it. I'm also going to go over installation and setup for folks that are completely new to Twitworks, so you can skip to here if you're already good on all that. Let me change that back for continuity. Okay, great. First, we're going to need to set a few things up. Obviously, you'll need Unreal Engine. In my case, version 5.1, but these steps should be the same for any version you might be using for your project. Next, you'll need to install the plugin Twitworks. You can grab it off of the Unreal Marketplace for 25 bucks. Click Install the Engine, and there'll be a little drop-down where you can select your version. I already have it installed, so it's not showing 5.1 for me. Don't worry, it'll be there, I promise, okay? Next, you'll need to set up a dev account for Twitch if you haven't already. Head to this URL, go to the Applications section on the right, and click Register Your Application. Under Name, give it something like Twitworks Fun Stuff, or whatever you want. Then under Auth Redirect URLs, I guess is how you say it, enter this exact text, and click Add. I'll also leave that text in the description so you can copy-paste if you wanna. Choose a category in the dropdown, which one isn't super important. Affirm your humanity. And then click Continue. After that, you'll see this screen. Go to the right of the application you just created and click the Manage button. On the next screen, there's going to be a box labeled Client ID. Copy this text. We're going to need to bring in an Unreal Engine pretty soon. Edit for clarity. Make sure you copy the text inside your Client ID box, not the one you're seeing on my screen. It's going to be different. Alright, now we finally get to start up Unreal. Open up your project, wait about 800 years for your shaders to compile, which is a great time to subscribe to the channel and follow me at twitch.tv/FruitsyCollins. Now open the edit dropdown and choose plugins. Search for Twitworks and make sure this box is checked to enable the plugin. I've already done it here since this is my first rodeo, yeah. Go back to the edit dropdown and this time choose project settings. Go over to the left, scroll down to the plugins section until you find Twitworks and click on that. Now here's where you're going to need that client ID that we set up on your Twitch dev application earlier. Go ahead and paste that inside the client ID box. Now you don't really need to change anything else on here. I'll note that under the local login port, the number should already be 8080, which should match the URL I gave you earlier. There's a section at the bottom to set up what prefix your commands will use. It's exclamation point by default, which a lot of other applications that interact with Twitch use. So if you're using something else that's conflicting with this, you can change that here. Next, we need to set up our level blueprint. This is going to run the Twitworks plugin and communicate with your chat. Go into the event graph, drag off of event begin play, and add a sequence. Create a new custom event and call it something like Startup Twitch. Drag off of one of the pins in your sequence node and call the event you just made. This way you can leave things nice and open if you want to add more events to your level later, and keep things nice and tidy. Move that somewhere comfy and drag a branch node off of it. What this is going to do is let you easily turn off all the Twitch interaction stuff when you're working on other stuff. If you ever want to deactivate it, just uncheck this boolean here to be false. Trust me, you're going to be glad you did this later. When Twitworks is enabled, your browser is going to pop up with this every time you hit play. This gets really annoying when you're working on other stuff and don't need it. For now, keep it as true. Drag off of the true pin of your branch node and search for Perform Local Twitch Login. Drag off the On Success pin and search for a Connect to Twitch node. Plug the credentials pin from the first node into the second. Drag off the credentials pin once more and search for Break Twitch Login Credentials. With this, you can grab your username and plug it into the channel pin on the Connect to Twitch node. Promote the Twitch chat pin to a variable and plug it in so that it gets set upon login. This way you don't have to keep dragging off of this pin and cook a plate of spaghetti every time you want to reference chat. Also, you're going to need to mosey back to that Connect to Twitch node and create custom events for these on-message and on-cheer pins. Drag off of the on-message pin, create a custom event, and give it the same name as the pin. Do the same for on-cheer, drag off the node, create a custom event, and give it the name of the pin. The reason we're dragging off the node is so that it'll add these pins to the custom events. We're not going to have these events do anything yet, but Unreal will complain if there's nothing plugged in here, so just leave them blank for now. Okay, now that we have that set up, we can go over commands. Now, we're going off the books a little bit for this project, and we're not going to use commands, but you should know how commands work if you're going to use this plugin, so I'll breeze through them real quick. If you want a tutorial that focuses on commands, the creator Riku VR has a couple of great videos on that aspect. Whenever I mention another tutorial in this video, I'll put a link in the description for you. Drag off the execution pin of the Twitch chat variable you created earlier. Search for a create Twitch command node. Grab your Twitch chat variable and get it. Plug that into the chat pin. Drag off the command binding pin and search for a make Twitch command binding node. Drag off that command pin and search for a make Twitch command. In this box, you can create a command name. This is what your chat's going to type to make things happen. If you had a prefix defined way back when we did the settings for the plugin, that prefix is going to have to be in front of the command to work. So if the prefix was an exclamation point and you want to make an explosion event, your chat would need to type exclamation point explosion or what have you. This box lets you put in a description, which pops up when chat types prefix help or whatever you defined here. You can make commands that take in parameters too. They're little add-ons that can change variables in the event. You saw the one that changes my hair color earlier, which chat would activate with hair color yellow, for instance. To define that, you drag off the parameters pin and make an array. Drag off that array's pin and search for a make Twitch command parameter node. Define the name of the parameter here. This is just the name of the variable for whatever chat adds, not a list of all the options that they have. It's more like a category. With all that set up, go way back to the make Twitch command binding node, drag off the binding pin and define a custom event. This is what happens in response to chat using the command. Drag off that execution pin and go nuts. In my example, I call the change hair color function that my character has in her character blueprint. That function takes in a parameter for the color they want. Then it looks that up in a map to find the corresponding material to apply to the hair. So I drag off the parameters pin, make a join string array node, and plug that into here. To accept a parameter, the function you call will need to take in a string for input. That'll be the parameter word chat types after the command. So commands are great and all, but there's a problem I've had with them personally. Chat needs to know what the commands are, and if you're a small creator that doesn't have a bits menu people can pick from yet, they usually aren't going to go into your about section and look up all the cool commands you worked so hard on wanting to use them. I made them for you. So, what if you want to do something more passive? Something that's going to happen when people are just typing normal stuff in chat? Not a problem. Go all the way back to the Connect Twitch node, go to the custom event you made for onMessage, give it some space, and create a sequence node. Drag off the Twitch message pin and plop a reroute node underneath that. This will make adding new events easier in the future, because you'll probably come up with more later, because it's fun. What we're going to do here is, instead of creating a command, we're going to take chat messages, which are passable on Unreal as strings, and parse it to figure out if we should trigger an event. I know that sounds like a command, but trust me, this is going to be different and cool. You'll be able to get more abstract info from what they're saying and account for different grammar and spellings and things. You can also make up for stuff that's not built into Twitworks. Woody Devs is another VTuber I'll recommend. He's got a tutorial on using this to make a follower event, which Twitworks doesn't have for some bizarre reason. It works alongside a chatbot, which together lets you do a lot of stuff. One thing I'll say about this, if I'm understanding how this works, anything coming off of onMessage is going to happen anytime anyone types anything. So you probably don't want to do something crazy like rebuild all your lighting every time somebody talks. we're not trying to run Doom off a toaster, but make good use of flow control to prevent recursion you don't need. Okay, Twitworks groundwork over. Let's start getting that character doing something. As an example, I'm going to show you how I make my character automatically wave whenever chat says something similar to hello, but this workflow will be general enough to create any kind of call and response behavior you want to do on your stream, and it should be pretty easy to figure out what you need to change. Drag off that reroute pin on your Twitch message and search for a break Twitch message node. Drag off the message body and search for a contains node. Use the one that's under strings. Drag off your sequence and create a branch. Take the return value pin from your contains node and plug it into the condition pin of the branch. Enter hi into the substring box of the contains node. What this does is grab the text that was typed in chat, looks to see if hi appears in it, and returns true if it does, which we can use to trigger an event just like a command. The difference between this and a command is that hi can appear anywhere in the message and still trigger. Prefixes are used in commands to keep them from being triggered by normal speech, but sometimes that's exactly what we want. Strings have a bunch of functions we can do that with. We can have a function trigger from phrases with variations in spelling, grammar, and typing styles without having to have a giant list of every possibility. We could split a sentence up, build new strings from parts of it, and on and on and on and on. You get it, it's great. I'm going to show you how to make your character respond to one phrase first, then we'll add things that'll make this more robust. Let's just get something that works first. Go to your viewport and select your character, then go to their character blueprint. Go to the event graph, create a custom event, and call it wave. Go back to your level blueprint, right-click near your branch node, and in the pop-up select create a reference to the character in your scene. You can also hold R and click to do the same thing. Drag off the pin, search for wave, and call the custom event you made in the character blueprint. And that's it for Twitworks. All Twitworks does is check the message and calls the event if it finds a trigger, and our character is going to do the rest. Again, we'll come back here later to make the string handling more complex. Go back to your character blueprint, create a variable, make it a boolean, and name it wave? I like to end booleans with a question mark to make blueprints easier to read, but name it what you want, I'm not your dad. We're going to call this boolean your animation blueprint to determine what state they're in, so it'll pick the correct animation. Pull off the execution pin and have this function set the bool to true. Okay, we're done with the character blueprint. Let's move on to the animation blueprint now. Now, I'm not going to get into how to create an animation itself, we're just going to tell an existing one you have when it should play. And we're going to create a state machine to manage when that happens. If your character doesn't have a state machine yet, don't worry, I will walk you through that part. Also, for how simple my character's behavior is, there are more efficient ways to do this, but since you're probably going to do something completely different on your stream with this tech, I didn't want to condense this example down to the point where it doesn't apply to what you want to do anymore. Also, I'm not a great programmer, I draw cartoons. When you're done with this tutorial, I recommend you check out another on state machines by Prismatica Dev. It goes over some approaches to more specific goals that might be a good match for what you're doing. If you follow tutorials on how to use LiveLink Face or something similar for your VTuber, your animation blueprint probably looks something like this. An anim graph setting the morph targets on your face, and the event graph evaluating frames for head movement. We can create a state machine without breaking any of that stuff pretty easily. First, right-click in your anim graph and search for Make State Machine. Name it whatever you want. Then copy everything that's in your anim graph that feeds into your pose output node. Double-click on your new state machine, drag off the entry point here, and in the pop-up, select Add New State. Name this something that makes sense for your character's default state. I'll just call mine Awake. Double-click on the box, and you'll see that it has an output node just like the anim graph does. Give yourself some room and paste the stuff from your anim graph in here, and hook it up to the output pose. Now you can go back to your anim graph and delete all that stuff, and plug the new state machine into the output pose instead. Now it basically does the same thing as before since there's only one state so far. Go into the state machine, right-click the awake state, and select Duplicate. Rename this new state Waving. I want my character to still be able to move her head and talk while waving, so this will make sure the tracking is active in both. On the awake state, click on this border area here and drag an arrow to the waving state. Do the same thing from the waving state to the awake state. Now, to explain what all this does, you can kind of think of the state machine like a house with some rooms in it. Each of these rooms stores instructions for what your character is supposed to do when they go in that room. and these arrows are the doors connecting those rooms. These icons that pop up next to the arrows are kind of like locks, and you need the right key to go through that door. Except in this case, it's more like someone hands you a key and then you're forcibly sucked into the other room against your will. It's not really a choice. This lets you control the logic of what animations can transition into each other. If you wanted to make a sleeping state, you could have it connect to awake, but not waving. Then you could remove the face tracking from the sleeping state so the character can't wave and talk while they're asleep, because that would be dumb. Now go to your event graph and create an Event Blueprint Initialize Animation node if you don't have one already. Drag off the execution pin and search for a IsValid node. You're going to get a few results. Pick the one with the question mark icon to the left. It's under Utilities. What we're going to do here is cast to your character's blueprint to call the wave function we made earlier. For the input object, search for a try-get-pawn-owner node. Drag off the IsValid pin and search for the name of your character. Again, you're going to end up with a couple of cast2 functions. Pick the one that doesn't have class after it. Then plug the getPawnOwner node into the object pin. It's going to connect to both of these nodes. Right-click on the blue pin and promote it to a variable. This will set your character as a variable in the animation blueprint so we can keep getting info from them with one neat little node instead of all this trash. You'll probably want to change the default name for clarity, but I'm still not your dad, so it's up to you. Make sure this is all being done on the Initialize Animation event. If you're doing face tracking, you're probably updating the animation every frame, but you only need to do it to this noise once. Go back to your state machine. Double-click on the transition rule icon for the arrow that's pointing to your waving state. Here you're going to define when your character can enter this state, which is going to get triggered by the wave function from your character, by way of Twitworks. To make that the condition, grab the variable holding your character that we just made, and get it. Drag off the pin, and search for the wave boolean. See, this is where that question mark thing kind of helps, but I know that's just dad talk. Get that bool and plug it into the canEnter transition pin of the results node. Now it'll keep its ears open for when Twitworks does its thing. Now the last part is just putting our new animation into this new state. Now the way I'm doing this is kind of dirt cheap. All I'm doing is replacing the base pose of her sitting with an animation sequence of her sitting, except now she's waving. There are way more sophisticated ways of doing stuff like this that are outside the scope of this tutorial and outside the scope of what I'm good at. If you know how to create things like additive animations or blend spaces, this would be a great place to use them. Since this animation sequence is the base pose, all this facial capture stuff can still happen on top of it, which is what I want. Since I'm just playing an animation sequence, transitioning out of this state and back to the default one is super simple. Instead of going into the transition rule and defining it with nodes, I can just select it and pick an option in the details panel. In the transition section, there's a checkbox called Automatic Rule Based on Sequence Player in State. All that means is that it'll end the waving state once the animation sequence is over, so we don't need to do any code. Alright, now it's pretty much done. The last thing I want to do with this is change the wave event in the character blueprint a little. Right now it just sets wave to true, but we want to turn it back to false when she's finished, otherwise she's only going to be able to do it once. We also want to make sure that she can't be interrupted by another trigger while she's in the middle of doing it, or she'll start over in the middle and it'll look janky and weird. So let's make a branch node, plug in the wave boolean into the condition pin to check if she's already waving, and if she isn't, then we can set wave to true. I'll then put in a delay node for 3 seconds, which is about how long the animation is, plus a little recovery time so she can't do it back and forth like a robot. After that's done, set wave to false again so she's available to do it again. Alright, let's take her for a test drive. Uh-oh. Oops. Oh no. Why would she wave to that? I don't want to encourage cursing on my stream. So you can probably figure out what went wrong. Twitworks is looking for the sequence HI, and the word shit meets that condition. Also, not everyone says hi. We want her to know more words, but not bad ones. So let's go in and fix all that shucks. Go into your level blueprint, and where you check the message with that contains node before, right-click on that and select Collapse to Function, and in the Details panel, make it a peer function. That just makes it so we don't have to execute it, it'll just work when another node needs it. Add an input and make it a string. Call it message body. Add a boolean as output and call it something like wave triggered. You can name that function that too if you want your father's approval. Go ahead and double click on that and get rid of that contains node because we don't need it. Because here's what I use. Now, it looks like a lot, and that's because it is. Language is complicated, but most of these steps are pretty straightforward, except for one of them. We'll get to that in a minute. In my experience, though, on my stream, this function has been really good at catching things and not getting false positives, so let's walk through it. The first step is to take in the message and make it all lowercase so capitalization isn't a factor. We can do that with a toLower node. It's the one under strings, not text. Promote the return value to a local variable and call it message. This is going to keep getting modified as we go on. Local variable just means it will only show up inside of this function and not when you're inside of other ones, and it helps keep you organized. The second step is to deal with time of day words like morning or night. This is going to be the most complicated thing to deal with because those can either be greetings or not, depending on the context. It's also really common, so taking care of that early will make the function faster if it finds something here. Because if we find a match, we don't need to keep looking for more, we're waving, baby! First, make another local variable and name it times of day. Make it a string, then in the details panel, click this icon and change it into an array. Enter these strings into it. It's basically morning, afternoon, night, blah blah blah, with some variations. We're going to look for each of these on our message, so create a for each loop. Get the array we made and plug it into here. Make sure this executes after the last step we did. We're going to check the message for two things. First, use a contains exactly node, the one under strings, plug the message into the top, and plug the array element from the for each loop into the bottom. Then second, we're going to take the array element and plug it into an append node. Again, it's under strings. Plug the array element into A and make sure box B has a space in it. I'm going to use underscores on my screen to make it easier for you to see where spaces should be, so use spaces on your end of things. Make a starts with node, plug the return value of append into the prefix pin, and plug our message in as the source string. What we're doing is checking if the message says morning by itself or starts with morning followed by a space and words or whatever. This catches things like morning and morning fruitsy, but not boy, mornings are tough, huh? So make a or boolean node to check if either one of these is true. Create a branch, plug the for each loop into that, then make the or node the condition for it. Drag off the true pin, search for a return node, and plug it in there. Make sure that this box is checked true. This will make the function return true and trigger a waving. Next, we want to remove any special characters from the message because we're not grammar queens. This part's going to be way easier. Make another string array and fill it with stuff like apostrophes, dashes, and other special characters. Make another for each loop and connect it to the completed pin, the last step that we did. Plug the special characters array into that. Off of loop body, set our message variable. Make a replace string node and plug the array elements into the from pin. Get the message and plug it into the source string. Make sure that the to box has nothing in it, no spaces, just nothing. This loop is going to go through the message and replace any special characters it finds with nothing. There isn't a delete character node, so replace with nothing is how you do that. Next, we're going to check for greeting phrases, ones that are multiple words. Let's pick up the pace since it looks a lot like our last step. Make another string array, name it something like wave triggers compound. Here's the list I made. Then a for each loop contains message and branch. If it finds one, have a return node be true. Next, we're going to check for single words, and then we'll be done. Take your message and parse it into an array after it completes the for each loop in the last section. This is going to separate the words into a list so we can ignore stuff like hi and sh that have the same letters in them. No more T for teen language on this stream. Promote the return value to another local variable and name it message separate words. You can leave it blank, it'll get populated on its own. Then we're going to check everything in that list separately. Make one last string array for wave trigger single. Fill it with all this garbage. Maybe more if you know more slang than I do, which you probably do because I'm old. Also, getting rid of the apostrophes and dashes earlier made this list a lot shorter, so you're welcome. Make one last for each loop and plug the array into that. Make a contains node, this time the one under array, not strings. Get the message separate words array we made earlier, plug that into the top, and array element into the bottom. This is going to get populated by all the words from the message coming in from chat. Make a branch off of loop body, plug the contains bool into it, and off of the true pin, make another true return node. Copy that and make this one false. And then finally, plug the completed pin of the for each loop into that. This is what happens if nothing trips over all that spaghetti up there. So yeah, that's a pretty complicated function there. But for the most part, it works really well on my streams. The only thing it doesn't ignore is someone saying things like, morning is my favorite time of day, because it treats everything after morning like a name if it's singular. This video is already too long, but take a crack at that if you want. Maybe check if there's more than one space in the sentence or something. This whole thing is just a demonstration to give you ideas at the end of the day. Speaking of ends, that's all I got for you. There's lots of cool things you can do with these tools, so play around with them and get creative. Solving puzzles like this is fun. I work on more Unreal stuff like this on my Twitch stream, so you should check that out too. I also draw and 3D model and play games on there, so come hang. I hope this example helped you and you figure out ways to make your stream even better than it already is. And if it did, let me know, because that'd make me happy. Bye!